Hello, and welcome back to Eleanor's The Quiet Chapter. Tonight we arrive at the final, beautiful pages of Jane Austen's beloved masterpiece, Pride and Prejudice. We've journeyed through initial judgments, surprising revelations, and the intricate dance of hearts and minds. Now, as the last chapters unfold, we witness the culmination of understanding, the triumph of genuine affection, and the quiet joy of true happiness. Find your comfortable space, quiet your mind, and let us delve into the harmonious conclusion of this timeless tale.
Prologue. The stage is set in Hertfordshire. In the quaint, verdant heart of England, amidst the gentle undulations of Hertfordshire's landscape, lay a society intricately woven with threads of custom, expectation, and the ever-present pursuit of advantageous matrimony. This was a world where a young woman's destiny was largely predetermined by her eligibility in the marriage market, a reality keenly felt by families of modest means, for whom a fortuitous union could secure not just comfort, but an entire lineage's future. Among these, the Bennet family of Longbourn stood as a vibrant, if sometimes chaotic, illustration of this societal truth. Longbourn, a respectable estate, was unfortunately entailed away from the female line, meaning that upon Mr. Bennet's death, it would pass to a distant male cousin, Mr. Collins. This looming reality cast a perpetual shadow over Mrs. Bennet's otherwise ebullient spirit, fueling her singular, unwavering obsession to see her 5 daughters, Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Catherine or Kitty, and Lydia, all advantageously married. Her days were consumed by this grand project, her conversations invariably circling back to the eligible bachelors of the county, their fortunes, and their potential as husbands. Mr. Bennet, a man of dry wit and philosophical detachment, often retreated to his library, finding solace in books and the quiet amusement of observing his wife's tireless machinations. His eldest daughters, Jane and Elizabeth, possessed a deeper understanding of their father's temperament and often shared in his wry observations, though Jane's gentle nature precluded any sharp judgment. Jane, the eldest, was a creature of serene beauty and an angelic disposition. Her kindness was boundless, her judgment charitable, and her gentle demeanor endeared her to all. She was, in her mother's eyes, the most promising candidate for a grand match, her loveliness a beacon of hope for the entire family. Elizabeth, the second daughter, possessed a lively mind, a quick wit, and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and independent spirit. She was her father's favorite, and her spirited nature often led her to challenge societal norms with a refreshing candor. While equally desirous of a happy marriage, Elizabeth sought a union founded on genuine affection and mutual respect, a notion that often clashed with her mother's more pragmatic, indeed desperate, views.
Mary, the third, was studious and earnest, though often lacking in grace and social finesse. She found solace in books and music, often performing for the family with more diligence than talent. Kitty and Lydia, the 2 youngest, were lively and superficial, easily swayed by the allure of military officers and the frivolous excitements of Meryton, the nearby town. Their youthful exuberance, though sometimes charming, often veered into impropriety, much to the exasperation of their elder sisters and the oblivious delight of their mother. The social fabric of Hertfordshire was largely composed of established families, their routines set, their expectations clear. Balls, dinners, and visits formed the predictable rhythm of their lives, providing the limited opportunities for young people to meet and form connections. For Mrs. Bennet, each social gathering was a strategic battlefield, every eligible gentleman a potential conquest. Her anxieties were perpetually high, her hopes easily inflated, and her disappointments keenly felt. It was into this meticulously structured, yet perpetually anxious, world that a whisper began to spread, a rumor that ignited Mrs. Bennet's hopes to a fever pitch. A wealthy young man of considerable fortune, a Mr. Charles Bingley, had taken a lease on Netherfield Park, a grand estate in their very neighborhood. He was single, amiable, and possessed of an income that promised a future of comfort and luxury. Accompanying him were his two sisters, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst, and a friend, a Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, whose fortune was said to be even more immense. The arrival of these new wealthy bachelors was nothing short of a seismic event in the quiet world of Hertfordshire. For Mrs. Bennet, it was a providential intervention, a golden opportunity that simply could not be squandered. Her mind immediately began to spin with possibilities, envisioning grand balls, elegant dinners, and, most importantly, the triumphant spectacle of her daughters, particularly Jane, securing a brilliant match. The stage was now set, the players assembled, and the quiet, unassuming county of Hertfordshire was about to become the backdrop for a drama of pride, prejudice, and the intricate dance of hearts and fortunes. The lives of the Bennet sisters, particularly Elizabeth, were on the cusp of an unforeseen transformation, poised to meet the challenges and revelations that these new arrivals would undoubtedly bring.
Chapter 1. The Arrival at Netherfield Park. The news of Mr. Bingley's arrival at Netherfield Park, a magnificent estate just a short distance from Longbourn, sent a ripple of exhilarating anticipation through the Bennet household, particularly electrifying Mrs. Bennet's already fervent imagination. For weeks, the very air seemed to hum with speculation about this wealthy young man, his amiable disposition, and, most crucially, his unmarried status. Mrs. Bennet, with her singular focus, saw in him not merely a new neighbor, but a providential answer to her most fervent prayers, a prosperous husband for one of her cherished daughters. Her conversations, already dominated by matrimonial prospects, now revolved almost exclusively around the strategic maneuvers required to secure Mr. Bingley's attention. The initial formalities were swiftly navigated. Mr. Bennet, with his characteristic dry wit, paid the requisite first visit to Netherfield Park, a social obligation that filled his wife and younger daughters with an almost unbearable suspense. Their eager questions upon his return were met with his usual laconic replies, a playful torment that only heightened their curiosity. When the momentous day of Mr. Bingley's return to Longbourn finally arrived, the Bennet ladies were arrayed in their finest, each hoping to make a favorable impression. Bingley, true to his reputation, proved to be everything amiable and engaging, his open countenance and cheerful demeanor instantly endearing him to the family, especially the gentle Jane. However, the true spectacle of the neighborhood's social season was yet to unfold. The much-anticipated Meryton Assembly Ball served as the grand stage where the new arrivals from Netherfield would be formally introduced to society. Mr. Bingley arrived not alone, but accompanied by his two elegant sisters, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst, and his exceptionally wealthy, yet undeniably proud friend, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. The collective gaze of the Meryton Assembly, sharpened by curiosity and a touch of envy, fell upon this distinguished party. Mr. Bingley, with his easy charm and affable nature, immediately won over the room. He danced every dance, smiled at everyone, and displayed a genuine enjoyment that made him universally liked. His sisters, though possessing an air of fashionable superiority, were also admired for their elegance and fortune.
But it was Mr. Darcy who became the immediate subject of intense scrutiny and widespread discussion. His immense wealth, rumored to be $10,000 a year, initially commanded universal respect. His tall, handsome figure and noble mien were undeniable. Yet, within half an hour, his initial admiration began to curdle into widespread disapproval.
Mr. Darcy danced only twice, once with Miss Bingley and once with Mrs. Hurst. He refused to be introduced to any other lady, and his aloof, reserved demeanor was interpreted as insufferable pride. He stood apart, observing the proceedings with an air of critical disdain, his handsome features seemingly incapable of a smile. His silence was not seen as shyness, but as arrogance. He was judged, swiftly and harshly, as the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world. This judgment was crystallized by a particular exchange that became the talk of the ball. Mr. Bingley, ever eager to promote social harmony, attempted to persuade Darcy to dance with Elizabeth Bennet, pointing out her lively eyes and agreeable countenance. Darcy's response, delivered with an audible indifference, was to declare her tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me, and to advise Bingley to return to Miss Bingley. This dismissive remark, overheard by Elizabeth, struck her with a sharp, immediate sting. Though she possessed a spirit that rarely allowed such slights to linger, the casual contempt in his words ignited a spark of resentment within her. From that moment, her initial indifference toward Mr. Darcy hardened into a spirited prejudice, a firm conviction of his insufferable arrogance. The ball continued, a vibrant tapestry of music, laughter, and whispered judgments. Jane Bennet, with her gentle beauty and sweet disposition, attracted Mr. Bingley's immediate and obvious admiration. He danced with her twice, conversed with her extensively, and displayed every sign of a man deeply smitten. Mrs. Bennet, observing this promising development, was in a state of ecstatic triumph, already envisioning wedding bells. Elizabeth, despite her own vexation with Mr. Darcy, found joy in her sister's happiness and the clear path opening before Jane. Yet, even amidst the general gaiety, the figure of Mr. Darcy remained a stark contrast. His proud aloofness, his refusal to engage, and his cutting remarks had effectively alienated him from the entire assembly. He was a man of immense fortune, but his demeanor had stripped him of all popularity. For Elizabeth, the ball served as a vivid introduction to the contrasting characters of the two gentlemen from Netherfield, the amiable, open-hearted Mr. Bingley, who promised happiness for Jane, and the haughty, disagreeable Mr. Darcy, who had, with a single careless phrase, earned her lasting contempt. The stage was now set not just for romance, but for a compelling clash of personalities and the intricate unraveling of deeply held first impressions. Chapter 2. A Dance of Disdain and Budding Affection. In the days following the Meryton Assembly Ball, the initial impression solidified, weaving a complex tapestry of burgeoning affection and entrenched disdain. For Jane Bennet, the path ahead seemed clear and bright. Mr. Bingley's admiration for her gentle beauty and sweet disposition was undeniable, a fact openly acknowledged by all who observed their interactions. He sought her out at every opportunity, his cheerful countenance lighting up in her presence, and their conversations flowed with an ease and mutual appreciation that promised a tender and happy connection. Jane, with her inherently charitable nature, found only goodness in him, and her quiet heart began to open to the prospect of his affection. Mrs. Bennet, ever vigilant, watched their blossoming relationship with unbridled delight, already counting the days until a formal proposal might be made.
However, the dynamics between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy were far more intricate and fraught with tension. Darcy's initial declaration of her mere tolerableness had ignited a spark of resentment in Elizabeth, a feeling that only grew with each subsequent encounter. His proud demeanor, his aloofness in company, and his evident condescension towards the provincial society of Meryton continually fueled her conviction of his insufferable arrogance. While Elizabeth possessed a spirit that was not easily intimidated, she found herself increasingly provoked by his presence, her quick wit often finding an outlet in sharp, pointed remarks directed at him. Yet, beneath Darcy's outward show of indifference, a reluctant fascination with Elizabeth had begun to take root. He found himself drawn to her lively eyes, her spirited intelligence, and the refreshing candor with which she often spoke her mind, even when it challenged his own preconceived notions. He observed her closely, noting her graceful movements, her engaging smile, and the genuine affection she displayed towards her sister Jane. Despite his initial judgment of their family's social inferiority, Elizabeth's unique charm began to penetrate his reserve, stirring an interest he had not anticipated. He found himself seeking out opportunities to observe her and occasionally to engage her in conversation, though these exchanges often devolved into witty sparring, further cementing Elizabeth's belief in his disagreeable nature.
The social circle at Netherfield, particularly Mr. Bingley's sisters, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst, played an unwitting role in deepening Elizabeth's prejudice against Darcy. Possessing a superficial elegance and a keen awareness of their own superior social standing, they viewed the Bennet family, with the exception of the beautiful Jane, with undisguised disdain. Their frequent cutting remarks about Mrs. Bennet's vulgarity, Kitty and Lydia's impropriety, and the overall lack of refinement at Longbourn were often made in Darcy's hearing. While Darcy himself might have held similar private opinions, his association with their condescending attitudes further solidified Elizabeth's negative perceptions. Miss Bingley, in particular, harbored a growing jealousy of Darcy's evident interest in Elizabeth, and her own attempts to disparage Elizabeth in Darcy's presence often backfired, inadvertently making Elizabeth more appealing to him. As Jane's connection with Mr. Bingley deepened, her visits to Netherfield became more frequent, often accompanied by Elizabeth. These occasions provided further opportunities for the complex interplay between Elizabeth and Darcy. He found himself increasingly intrigued by her unconventional charm, while she remained steadfast in her conviction of his pride and arrogance. She observed his interactions with others, particularly his coldness towards those he deemed beneath him, and each observation served to reinforce her initial judgment. The more he seemed to seek her company, the more she recoiled, convinced that his attention was merely a manifestation of his overbearing pride. The subtle dance of disdain and budding affection continued, largely unnoticed by the wider society, but keenly felt by the two individuals at its center. Elizabeth, confident in her judgment and secure in her spirited independence, remained oblivious to the true nature of Darcy's growing regard. She saw only the outward manifestation of his pride, failing to perceive the deeper, more complex emotions stirring beneath his reserved exterior. Darcy, for his part, struggled with an attraction that defied his own carefully constructed social prejudices, finding himself increasingly drawn to a woman who challenged his every expectation. The stage was set for a series of misunderstandings and revelations as the intricate interplay of their strong personalities continued to unfold, laying the groundwork for the profound transformations that lay ahead. Chapter 3. The Peculiarities of Mr. Collins.
The delicate dance of social maneuvering in Hertfordshire was soon interrupted by the arrival of a new figure, one who brought with him a peculiar blend of pompous self-importance and obsequious deference. This was Mr. William Collins, a clergyman, and, more significantly, the distant cousin to whom the Longbourn estate was entailed. His letters preceding his visit had been a curious mix of formal apology for the entailment and elaborate praise for Lady Catherine de Bourgh, his formidable patroness, whose influence he cited at every turn. Mrs. Bennet, despite her initial resentment over the entailment, was quickly swayed by his flattering address and the potential for a new, eligible bachelor in the house. Mr. Collins himself was a man of imposing height, a rather solemn countenance, and an unshakable conviction in his own consequence. His conversation was a tedious stream of elaborate compliments and deferential remarks directed towards Lady Catherine, whose every opinion and action he lauded with tiresome regularity. He spoke with a formality that bordered on the absurd, his every utterance carefully constructed to convey a sense of his own propriety and the immense respect he commanded. Elizabeth, with her keen eye for absurdity, found him a source of endless, if sometimes irritating, amusement. It quickly became apparent that Mr. Collins had arrived at Longbourn with a very specific purpose in mind: to select a wife from among the Bennet daughters. He viewed this as a duty, a proper and conscientious act to compensate the family for the impending loss of their estate. His initial gaze fell on Jane, whose beauty and amiable disposition seemed to him the most suitable for his elevated station. However, Mrs. Bennet, eager to secure Jane for Mr. Bingley, subtly redirected his attention towards Elizabeth, assuring him that Jane's affections were already otherwise engaged. Mr. Collins, with his characteristic lack of discernment, readily shifted his matrimonial intentions to Elizabeth, convinced that her lively spirit would make a suitable companion for his dignified life. His proposal to Elizabeth was a masterpiece of self-importance and a complete disregard for her feelings. He presented his offer not as an outpouring of affection, but as a carefully reasoned three-part argument based on his duty as a clergyman, his desire to please Lady Catherine, and his pragmatic need for a wife. He spoke of his comfortable living, his respectable connections, and the honor he was bestowing upon her. He seemed utterly oblivious to Elizabeth's growing discomfort and her increasingly pointed attempts to interrupt his monologue.
Elizabeth, though taken aback by the sheer audacity of his presumption, was firm and unequivocal in her refusal. She declared that she could not possibly make him happy, nor could he make her happy, and that she was not the woman to suit him. Mr. Collins, however, was not easily deterred. He interpreted her rejection as a mere feminine delicacy, a conventional refusal designed to encourage further pleading. He insisted that he understood the gentle art of persuasion and continued to press his suit with unwavering confidence. Her repeated, emphatic refusals finally broke through his thick skin, but only to unleash Mrs. Bennet's furious indignation. The ensuing scene was one of domestic chaos, with Mrs. Bennet alternately pleading, scolding, and threatening Elizabeth, convinced that her daughter was throwing away the family's last chance at security. Mr. Bennet, summoned to intervene, delivered his famous pronouncement. "An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do." This declaration, delivered with his usual dry wit, settled the matter, much to Mrs. Bennet's despair. The departure of Mr. Collins, seemingly without a bride, brought a temporary reprieve to Elizabeth. However, the true shock was yet to come. Within days, a letter arrived bearing the news of Mr. Collins's engagement,
not to Elizabeth, but to her dearest friend, Charlotte Lucas. Charlotte, a sensible and pragmatic young woman of 27, had accepted Mr. Collins's offer not out of love, but out of a clear-eyed understanding of her own limited prospects. She saw in him a comfortable establishment and a secure future, a practical solution to the anxieties of her unmarried state. Elizabeth was initially stunned, then deeply troubled by her friend's decision. She could not comprehend how her friend, knowing Mr. Collins's absurdities, could commit to such a union. It was a stark reminder of the harsh realities faced by women in their society, and it forced Elizabeth to confront the differing priorities that shaped their lives. While she respected Charlotte's honesty, she could not reconcile herself to a marriage devoid of affection. This development cast a new light on the complexities of marriage, adding another layer to Elizabeth's understanding of the societal pressures that governed her world. The peculiarities of Mr. Collins had, in their own way, set in motion a chain of events that would continue to shape Elizabeth's journey and challenge her perceptions.
Chapter 4. Charms and Shadows, the Wickham Narrative.
The news of Charlotte Lucas's engagement to Mr. Collins sent a ripple of bewildered disappointment through Elizabeth, though her initial shock eventually gave way to a quiet, if resigned, acceptance of her friend's pragmatic choice. The social landscape of Meryton, however, soon offered a new distraction, one that would profoundly influence Elizabeth's perceptions and deepen her already strong prejudice against Mr. Darcy. This distraction arrived in the captivating form of Mr. George Wickham, a handsome and amiable young officer newly stationed with the militia in Meryton. Mr. Wickham possessed a charm that was immediately evident and universally admired. His manners were easy and engaging, his conversation lively and agreeable, and his handsome features were complemented by an air of open sincerity. He quickly became a favorite among the young ladies of Meryton, and Elizabeth, with her discerning eye for character, found herself particularly drawn to his apparent candor and pleasant disposition. He seemed to embody all the qualities that Mr. Darcy so conspicuously lacked. Their first significant encounter occurred during a social gathering in Meryton, where fate, with a touch of dramatic irony, brought Wickham and Darcy into the same room. The tension between the two men was palpable, a brief, silent exchange of cold glances that spoke volumes to the observant Elizabeth. Her curiosity piqued. She later sought an explanation from Mr. Wickham, who, with a seemingly reluctant honesty, began to unfold a tale that confirmed all of Elizabeth's darkest suspicions about Mr. Darcy. Wickham's narrative was compelling and delivered with an air of injured innocence. He recounted how he had been the favorite godson of Mr. Darcy's late father, who had intended to provide for him handsomely by leaving him a valuable living in the church. However, upon the elder Darcy's death, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, out of pure malice and envy, had supposedly withheld this inheritance, leaving Wickham in a state of comparable poverty and forcing him into a military career. Wickham presented himself as the victim of Darcy's cruel pride and unprincipled injustice, a man wronged by a powerful and arrogant individual.
This story resonated deeply with Elizabeth. It perfectly aligned with her existing impressions of Mr. Darcy's haughtiness and disdain for those beneath him. Wickham's charming demeanor and seemingly sincere distress lent an air of undeniable truth to his account. Elizabeth, already predisposed to dislike Darcy, found her prejudice against him solidified into an unshakable conviction of his villainy. She felt a profound sympathy for Wickham, seeing him as a noble spirit unjustly oppressed by a powerful tyrant. The tale spread quickly through the Meryton society, further cementing Darcy's unpopularity and elevating Wickham to the status of a wronged hero. Elizabeth, in particular, became a fervent defender of Wickham's character and a vocal critic of Darcy's. She discussed the matter with Jane, who, with her characteristic reluctance to believe ill of anyone, found it difficult to reconcile Wickham's story with Mr. Bingley's high regard for Darcy. However, Elizabeth's conviction was too strong to be swayed by Jane's gentle doubts. The contrast between the two men became a constant theme in Elizabeth's thoughts. She saw Wickham as the embodiment of amiable virtue, a man of genuine feeling and integrity, while Darcy represented everything she despised: pride, arrogance, and cold-hearted injustice. This perception was further reinforced by Darcy's continued aloofness and his seemingly deliberate avoidance of Wickham in social settings, which Elizabeth interpreted as a clear sign of his guilt. Unbeknownst to Elizabeth, the charming facade of Mr. Wickham concealed a far more complex and morally ambiguous character. His tale of woe was a carefully constructed deception designed to elicit sympathy and manipulate opinion. His true nature, one of recklessness and self-interest, remained hidden beneath a veneer of agreeable manners. Elizabeth, blinded by her prejudice against Darcy and her admiration for Wickham's engaging personality, was unable to perceive the underlying deceit. The Wickham narrative, though seemingly a simple tale of injustice, served as a crucial turning point in Elizabeth's journey, deepening her misjudgment of Darcy and setting the stage for future revelations that would challenge her most deeply held convictions. Her spirited mind, so quick to judge, had fallen prey to a subtle deception, a shadow cast by charm and a compelling, yet false, narrative.
Chapter 5. Unsettling Departures and a New Domain.
The captivating yet ultimately deceptive narrative spun by Mr. Wickham had firmly entrenched Elizabeth's prejudice against Mr. Darcy. Her conviction of his villainy seemed unassailable, fueled by her own spirited independence and a natural inclination to judge character swiftly. However, the social currents of Hertfordshire were about to shift once more, bringing with them a series of unsettling departures that would profoundly impact the Bennet family, particularly the gentle Jane. The first and most devastating of these shifts was the abrupt and unexpected departure of Mr. Bingley from Netherfield Park. Without warning, his lease was given up, his household disbanded, and he, along with his sisters and Mr. Darcy, vanished from the neighborhood. The news struck Jane Bennet with a quiet, profound heartbreak. She had allowed herself to hope, to believe in the sincerity of Mr. Bingley's attentions, and his sudden absence left her bewildered and deeply wounded. Her gentle nature prevented her from openly expressing her despair, but her pale countenance and subdued demeanor spoke volumes of her inner turmoil. Mrs. Bennet, in her usual dramatic fashion, railed against Mr. Bingley's perceived perfidy, convinced that he had cruelly trifled with Jane's affections. Elizabeth, while sharing her sister's sorrow, found herself increasingly suspicious of Mr. Bingley's sisters and, by extension, Mr. Darcy, believing they had conspired to separate the amiable couple. The gloom that settled over Longbourn was palpable. Jane retreated into her quiet sorrow, while Mrs. Bennet's lamentations filled the house with a constant hum of complaint. Elizabeth, though distressed by her sister's unhappiness, found a temporary respite from the suffocating atmosphere when an invitation arrived for her to visit her newly married friend, Charlotte Lucas, at Hunsford Parsonage in Kent. Charlotte, now Mrs. Collins, had settled into her new life with a practical contentment that Elizabeth struggled to fully comprehend. The journey to Kent provided Elizabeth with a much-needed change of scenery, a temporary escape from the familiar anxieties of Longbourn. Hunsford Parsonage, though modest, was a comfortable and well-ordered home, and Charlotte, ever sensible, seemed to be making the best of her peculiar marriage. However, the true significance of Elizabeth's visit soon became apparent.
Hunsford Parsonage was situated in the immediate vicinity of Rosings Park, the magnificent estate of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Mr. Darcy's formidable and aristocratic aunt.
Lady Catherine was a woman of immense consequence, possessing an imperious demeanor, an unshakable conviction in her own superiority, and a penchant for dictating the lives of those around her. Her patronage extended to Mr. Collins, whom she treated with a mixture of condescension and demanding expectation. Elizabeth, with her independent spirit and quick wit, found herself an object of Lady Catherine's particular scrutiny. The grand dinners at Rosings Park were less social gatherings and more opportunities for Lady Catherine to display her wealth, her opinions, and her absolute authority. Elizabeth, accustomed to a more relaxed social environment, found Lady Catherine's constant questioning and unsolicited advice both amusing and irritating. It was during these visits to Rosings Park that Elizabeth found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable proximity to Mr. Darcy. He had arrived at Rosings to visit his aunt, and his presence cast a familiar shadow over Elizabeth's interactions. His proud reserve seemed unchanged, and his occasional unexpected appearances in her walks or at social functions often left her feeling discomposed. He would observe her with an intensity that she found unsettling, yet he rarely engaged her in conversation that was not tinged with formality or a hint of his usual disdain. Elizabeth, still firmly convinced of his role in Jane's unhappiness and Wickham's supposed ruin, viewed his presence with a renewed sense of animosity. She interpreted his observations as critical scrutiny, his occasional inquiries as condescension. The grand setting of Rosings Park, with its imposing mistress and its connection to Darcy's aristocratic world, only served to reinforce her preconceived notions of his insurmountable pride. Unbeknownst to her, however, the stage was being meticulously set for a series of encounters and revelations that would challenge her most deeply held convictions, forcing her to confront the true nature of both herself and the man she so vehemently disliked. Her journey to Kent, initially a means of escape, was quickly becoming a new domain for the unfolding drama of her heart and mind.
Chapter 6. A Proposal and a Revelation. Elizabeth's visit to Hunsford Parsonage, initially a welcome respite, had become a period of increasing disquiet due to the frequent, almost oppressive presence of Mr. Darcy at Rosings Park. His observations, his occasional inquiries, and his seemingly unchanged proud demeanor continued to fuel her animosity. She remained firmly convinced of his role in Jane's heartbreak and Wickham's supposed ruin, and his proximity only served to reinforce these deeply held prejudices. The grand yet stifling atmosphere of Rosings Park, dominated by Lady Catherine de Bourgh's imperious will, seemed to mirror the rigid pride Elizabeth perceived in Darcy himself. Then, one day, an event occurred that was as astonishing as it was ill-fated. Mr. Darcy, in a moment of profound misjudgment and against all of Elizabeth's expectations, presented himself at Hunsford Parsonage and with a declaration of his fervent admiration made her an offer of marriage. His proposal, however, was not delivered with humility or tenderness. Instead, it was an exposition of his own condescension, a detailed account of the immense struggles he had overcome to bring himself to propose to a woman whose family and connections were so decidedly inferior to his own. He spoke of his wounded pride, his reluctant admiration, and the condescending sacrifice he was making for her. Elizabeth listened, her spirit rising in a tempest of fury and indignation,
Every word he uttered, every proud reference to her family's deficiencies served only to inflame her already strong dislike. When he finished, her rejection was swift, fierce, and unequivocal. She accused him of arrogance, of having deliberately separated Jane and Mr. Bingley, and of cruelly ruining Wickham's prospects. Her words, delivered with passionate conviction, left no room for doubt or further pleading. She declared that he was the last man in the world whom she could ever be prevailed upon to marry. Darcy, stunned by the vehemence of her refusal, departed in silence, leaving Elizabeth in a state of agitated triumph. She had spoken her mind, defended her sister and Wickham, and decisively rejected the proudest man she knew. Her emotions, however, were soon complicated by a new and unexpected development. The following morning, Darcy returned not to renew his suit, but to deliver a letter. It was a long, detailed epistle written with a clarity and sincerity that Elizabeth could not ignore.
As she read, her initial triumph slowly gave way to a dawning horror and profound self-reproach. Darcy's letter meticulously refuted Wickham's accusations, revealing the true manipulative nature of that charming rogue. He explained that Wickham, far from being wronged, had squandered his inheritance, attempted to elope with Darcy's young sister, Georgiana, for her fortune, and was a man utterly devoid of principle. The truth of Wickham's character, so carefully concealed beneath his amiable facade, now stood exposed, forcing Elizabeth to confront the painful reality of her own gullibility and misjudgment. The letter also addressed his interference in Jane and Bingley's relationship. Darcy admitted to persuading Bingley to leave Netherfield, but he presented his reasons not as malice, but as a misguided attempt to protect his friend from what he perceived as an imprudent alliance. He detailed Mrs. Bennet's impropriety, Kitty and Lydia's wildness, and the general lack of decorum displayed by the younger Bennet sisters, which he believed would compromise Bingley's reputation. While Elizabeth still felt the sting of Jane's suffering, she could not deny the uncomfortable truth in some of Darcy's observations regarding her family's conduct. As she finished reading, Elizabeth's world seemed to tilt on its axis. The man she had so vehemently disliked, the embodiment of pride and arrogance, now stood revealed in a new, complex light. Her own prejudice, so confidently held, had blinded her to the truth. She had judged him harshly, based on insufficient evidence and a charming deception, while misjudging Wickham entirely. The shame of her error was immense, and she spent hours reevaluating every past interaction, every word spoken, every impression formed. The revelation was a profound and humbling experience. Elizabeth's spirited mind, so quick to form opinions, was now forced to confront its own fallibility. The man she had rejected, the man whose proposal had so enraged her, was not the villain she had imagined. He was a man of integrity, albeit one burdened by a pride that was slowly giving way to a deeper understanding. This letter, born from a failed proposal, became the catalyst for Elizabeth's true growth, shattering her prejudices and opening her heart and mind to a new, more nuanced understanding of character, both her own and Mr. Darcy's. The path to her eventual happiness, though still long and winding, had been irrevocably set in motion by this astonishing proposal and its subsequent revealing letter.
Chapter 7. The Journey to Pemberley and a Changed Perspective. The profound revelations contained within Mr. Darcy's letter had shattered Elizabeth's long-held prejudices, leaving her in a state of deep introspection and humbling self-reproach. The man she had so confidently judged as arrogant and cruel now stood revealed as a figure of integrity,
albeit one whose pride had been tempered by a nascent understanding. The shame of her own misjudgment weighed heavily upon her, and she spent weeks reevaluating every past interaction, every word spoken, and every impression formed. Her spirited mind, so quick to form opinions, was now forced to confront its own fallibility, a painful yet ultimately transformative experience. Returning to Longbourn, Elizabeth found the familiar anxieties of her home still present, though now viewed through a new lens of understanding. Jane remained quietly heartbroken by Mr. Bingley's abrupt departure, and Mrs. Bennet's incessant lamentations continued to fill the house. Elizabeth, however, was now burdened by a secret knowledge that she could not share, a truth that complicated her every interaction and deepened her internal struggle. The memory of Darcy's proposal, once a source of indignation, now filled her with a complex mix of regret and a reluctant, nascent respect. As the summer approached, Elizabeth eagerly anticipated a planned tour of the north of England with her aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner. The Gardiners were sensible, amiable people, possessing a genuine affection for their nieces and a discerning eye for character. Elizabeth looked forward to the change of scenery and the opportunity for quiet reflection away from the familiar confines of Hertfordshire. The journey itself was a welcome distraction, as they traveled through picturesque landscapes, visiting various estates, and enjoying the simple pleasures of touring. The tour eventually brought them to Derbyshire, a county renowned for its natural beauty and magnificent country estates. It was here that Mrs. Gardiner, with a casual suggestion, proposed a visit to Pemberley, the celebrated estate of Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth's heart gave a sudden, involuntary leap. She had been assured that Mr. Darcy was not in residence, having gone to London, and the opportunity to see his home without the discomfort of his presence was too tempting to resist. She was curious, despite herself, to see the place that belonged to the man who had so profoundly unsettled her world. Upon their arrival at Pemberley, Elizabeth was immediately struck by its beauty and grandeur. The house itself was magnificent, yet possessed an air of tasteful elegance rather than ostentatious display. The grounds were expansive and meticulously kept, with natural beauty enhanced by careful cultivation. As they toured the house, Elizabeth found herself increasingly impressed. The rooms were spacious and beautifully furnished, and every aspect of the estate spoke of good taste and substantial wealth.
The housekeeper, a woman of long and devoted service to the Darcy family, provided glowing accounts of her master's character. She spoke of his kindness, his generosity, and his benevolent treatment of his tenants and servants. She described him as a just and amiable landlord, a devoted brother, and a man universally respected by those who knew him best. These descriptions, delivered with sincere admiration, directly contradicted Elizabeth's long-held perceptions of Darcy's pride and coldness. Her shame deepened as she realized how thoroughly she had misjudged him based on superficial impressions and the malicious gossip of others. Then, in a moment of stunning and utterly unexpected coincidence, Mr. Darcy himself appeared. He had returned to Pemberley earlier than anticipated, and his sudden presence filled Elizabeth with a mixture of profound embarrassment and a renewed sense of awkwardness. However, his demeanor was remarkably different from the proud, aloof man she had known in Hertfordshire and Kent. He was composed, yet displayed a warmth and genuine humility that astonished her. He greeted her aunt and uncle with polite deference, and his conversation with Elizabeth was marked by a newfound gentleness and an evident desire to please. He inquired after her family, particularly Jane, with a sincere concern that touched Elizabeth deeply. He introduced his young sister, Georgiana,
a shy but amiable girl, and displayed a tender affection towards her that further softened Elizabeth's perception. The encounter at Pemberley was a revelation. Darcy, in his own home, surrounded by those who loved and respected him, displayed a character entirely at odds with the proud villain she had constructed in her mind. His softened demeanor, his genuine kindness, and the universal esteem in which he was held by his household all served to dismantle the last vestiges of her prejudice. Elizabeth left Pemberley with a heart profoundly changed, her understanding of Mr. Darcy, and indeed of herself, irrevocably altered. The journey to his magnificent estate had become a journey of self-discovery, paving the way for a future she had never dared to imagine.
Chapter 8. The Scandal and the Secret Intervention. Elizabeth's return from her transformative journey to Pemberley was marked by a profound shift in her understanding of Mr. Darcy, a change that softened her heart and humbled her spirit. The lingering anxieties of Longbourn, however, quickly reasserted themselves, and the fragile peace she had found was soon shattered by news that plunged the entire Bennet family into a new, far deeper abyss of disgrace and despair. The shocking tidings arrived in a frantic letter from Jane. Lydia, the youngest and most imprudent of the Bennet sisters, had eloped with Mr. Wickham. The news struck Elizabeth with a physical blow. Her spirited sister, barely 16, had run off with a man of questionable character, a man whose true nature Elizabeth had only recently come to understand. The disgrace was immense, a stain upon the family's reputation that threatened to ruin all their sisters' prospects for advantageous marriages. Mrs. Bennet, as might be expected, collapsed into hysterics, her lamentations filling the house with a constant agonizing wail. Mr. Bennet, usually so detached, was consumed by a quiet, desperate shame, blaming himself for his earlier indulgence of Lydia's frivolous inclinations. A frantic, agonizing search began. Mr. Bennet immediately departed for London, determined to find his wayward daughter and the man who had disgraced her. Elizabeth, Jane, and the Gardiners remained at Longbourn, enduring the torturous wait, each day bringing new fears and fresh despair. The family's social standing teetered on the brink of complete ruin. A marriage, even a forced one, was the only way to salvage their honor. But Wickham, a man without fortune or principle, seemed unlikely to agree to such a union without considerable inducement. In the midst of this agonizing crisis, an unexpected figure appeared, Mr. Darcy. He arrived at Longbourn, drawn by the news of the scandal, his presence initially filling Elizabeth with a renewed sense of mortification. The humiliation of her family's disgrace, now witnessed by the man whose good opinion she had recently come to value, was almost unbearable. However, Darcy's demeanor was not one of judgment, but of grave concern. He listened to the unfolding tragedy with a quiet intensity, his presence a strange mixture of comfort and unspoken reproach. The days that followed were a blur of despair, until, miraculously, news arrived that Lydia and Wickham had been found. Even more astonishingly, they were to be married. The relief that swept through the Bennet household was immense, a wave of desperate gratitude that momentarily eclipsed the lingering shame. The terms of the marriage, however, were peculiar. Wickham, a man known to be deeply in debt, seemingly agreed to the union in exchange for a modest income and the payment of his debts, a sum that Mr. Bennet, despite his financial limitations, had somehow managed to procure.
The exact details of the arrangement remain shrouded in mystery, and Elizabeth, with her keen intellect, found herself increasingly puzzled by the improbable turn of events. Wickham's sudden willingness to marry Lydia, despite his lack of means and his history of avoiding responsibility, seemed utterly out of character. It was only through subtle hints and, later, a chance conversation with her aunt, Mrs. Gardiner, that the astonishing truth began to emerge. It was Mr. Darcy, driven by a profound sense of responsibility and a secret, unwavering affection for Elizabeth, who had intervened. He had located Lydia and Wickham in London, and it was he who had negotiated the terms of their marriage. He had paid Wickham's considerable debts, secured him a commission in the north, and provided the financial inducement necessary to ensure the union. His actions were entirely selfless, undertaken in secret to protect Elizabeth and her family from irreparable disgrace, a sacrifice of his own reputation and fortune for the sake of the woman he loved. The revelation struck Elizabeth with a profound sense of awe and overwhelming gratitude. The man she had once so fiercely condemned, the embodiment of pride, had acted with a generosity and selflessness that defied all her previous perceptions. His hidden intervention, undertaken without any expectation of recognition or reward, completely dismantled the last vestiges of her prejudice. She realized the true depth of his character, the quiet strength and unwavering integrity that lay beneath his reserved exterior. The scandal of Lydia's elopement, though a source of immense pain, had ultimately served as the catalyst for Elizabeth's final, complete understanding of Mr. Darcy, paving the way for a future she was now, more than ever, ready to embrace.
Chapter 9. Reconciliations and Renewed Hopes. The astonishing revelation of Mr. Darcy's selfless intervention in Lydia's scandalous elopement had profoundly altered Elizabeth's perception of him. Her prejudice, once so firmly rooted, had completely dissolved, replaced by a deep admiration and a burgeoning respect for his true character. The shame of her own misjudgment now mingled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude, and her heart, once closed to him, began to entertain a new and complex array of emotions. The first tangible sign of renewed hope arrived with the unexpected return of Mr. Charles Bingley to Netherfield Park. His absence had cast a long shadow over Jane Bennet's gentle spirit, and her quiet heartbreak had been a source of constant sorrow for Elizabeth. Now Bingley's cheerful presence and his immediate renewed attention to Jane brought a much-needed sense of relief and joy to Longbourn. His amiable disposition, his open admiration, and his evident desire to rekindle their former intimacy quickly dispelled any lingering doubts about his affections. Their relationship blossomed once more, unhindered by external interference, and it was not long before Mr. Bingley, with his characteristic impulsivity and genuine affection, made a formal proposal of marriage to Jane. The engagement of Jane and Mr. Bingley was met with universal delight, particularly by Mrs. Bennet, whose most cherished ambition for her eldest daughter had finally been realized, and the prospect of a grand wedding and a secure future for Jane filled her with triumphant satisfaction. Elizabeth, witnessing her beloved sister's happiness, felt a profound sense of contentment, her own heart lightened by the promise of a brighter future for her family. The cloud of disgrace that had hung over Longbourn seemed to dissipate, replaced by an atmosphere of celebration and renewed hope. However, the path to happiness for Elizabeth was not yet entirely clear. The intricate web of social expectations and personal pride still had one more dramatic confrontation in store for her. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, Mr. Darcy's formidable aunt, having heard rumors of a potential attachment between her nephew and Elizabeth, made a dramatic and intrusive visit to Longbourn. Her arrival was unannounced, her demeanor imperious, and her purpose alarmingly clear: to demand that Elizabeth renounce any possibility of marrying Mr. Darcy.
Lady Catherine, convinced of her own unassailable authority and the absolute necessity of maintaining social distinctions, confronted Elizabeth with a torrent of questions and thinly veiled insults. She spoke of Elizabeth's inferior connections, her lack of fortune, and the disgrace of Lydia's elopement, all as insurmountable obstacles to a union with her noble nephew. She insisted that Darcy was destined for her own daughter, Miss de Bourgh, and that any attachment to Elizabeth would be a gross betrayal of his family's honor. She demanded a solemn promise from Elizabeth that she would never encourage Darcy's attentions. Elizabeth, though initially taken aback by Lady Catherine's audacity, met her challenges with a calm, unwavering resolve. Her spirited independence, which had once led her to clash with Darcy, now served her well in this confrontation. She refused to be intimidated, asserting her right to make her own choices and declining to give any promise that would compromise her future happiness. Her answers, though respectful in tone, were firm and unyielding, directly challenging Lady Catherine's imperious authority. Ironically, this intrusive confrontation served an entirely different purpose than Lady Catherine had intended. Her furious insistence on Darcy's attachment to Elizabeth and her desperate attempts to prevent their union inadvertently revealed the depth of Darcy's continued affection. Elizabeth realized that Darcy must still entertain hopes of marrying her, for why else would his aunt be so vehemently opposed? Lady Catherine's attempts to separate them, far from succeeding, only strengthened Elizabeth's resolve and hinted at the enduring nature of Darcy's regard. The dramatic encounter, though unpleasant, inadvertently paved the way for the final and happy resolution of their complex relationship. The stage was now truly set for the ultimate reconciliation as the last obstacles of Pride and Prejudice began to crumble.
Chapter 10. The Path to Happiness. The dramatic confrontation with Lady Catherine de Bourgh, far from deterring Elizabeth, had ironically served to strengthen her resolve and, more importantly, confirmed the enduring nature of Mr. Darcy's affection. Her spirit, once bruised by his initial disdain, was now buoyed by the subtle hints of his continued regard. The path to happiness, though still requiring a delicate navigation of pride and lingering misunderstandings, was finally becoming clear. The first significant step on this path was taken by Mr. Darcy himself. Having learned of his aunt's intrusive visit to Longbourn and Elizabeth's spirited refusal to yield to her demands, he understood that the last obstacle of Elizabeth's prejudice had likely crumbled. He returned to Longbourn with Mr. Bingley, and during a walk with Elizabeth, he seized the opportunity to speak to her once more. This time, his approach was entirely different. Gone was the condescension, the proud enumeration of his sacrifices. His voice was humble, his manner earnest, and his words flowed with a genuine tenderness that touched Elizabeth's heart deeply. He spoke of his continued affection, his regret for his past arrogance, and his sincere desire to make amends for the pain he had caused, particularly to Jane. He confessed his faults, acknowledging the pride that had blinded him and the misjudgments that had led to so much misunderstanding. He did not demand acceptance. He pleaded for her forgiveness and her affection, offering a future built on mutual respect and genuine love. Elizabeth listened, her heart overflowing with a complex mix of emotions. The man before her was no longer the haughty figure she had once despised, but a man who had grown, humbled by his own mistakes, and whose love for her was now undeniably clear. Her own prejudice had long since dissolved, replaced by a deep understanding and admiration for his true character. With a sincerity that matched his own,
she accepted his proposal, her emotional acceptance marking the culmination of a long and intricate journey of self-discovery and evolving perceptions.
The announcement of their engagement was met with a mixture of astonishment and delight within the Bennet family. Mrs. Bennet, upon learning that her second daughter was to marry a man of $10,000 a year, was thrown into a state of ecstatic, almost delirious joy. Her initial shock at the unexpected news quickly transformed into an overwhelming triumph. Her anxieties about Elizabeth's future, and indeed the family's security, vanished in a wave of triumphant satisfaction. She spoke incessantly of carriages, grand houses, and the immense fortune that awaited her dear Elizabeth, her happiness knowing no bounds. Mr. Bennet, a man of more reserved temperament, initially received the news with a quiet skepticism. He knew his daughter's independent spirit and her former dislike for Darcy. He questioned Elizabeth closely, seeking assurance that her affection was genuine and that she would truly be happy in such a union. Elizabeth, with a newfound openness, confessed the full story of her journey, her initial prejudice, Darcy's intervention in Lydia's affair, and the gradual evolution of her feelings. Her father, seeing the sincerity in her eyes and recognizing the profound change in her heart, gave his blessing with a quiet satisfaction, recognizing that his favorite daughter had indeed found a partner worthy of her spirit. Jane and Bingley, already immersed in their own happiness, offered their heartfelt congratulations, their joy for Elizabeth and Darcy mirroring their own tender affection. The younger Bennet sisters, though less capable of comprehending the true depth of the match, were nevertheless thrilled by the prospect of another grand wedding and the reflected glory it would bring. The path to happiness for Elizabeth and Darcy had been long and arduous, fraught with misunderstandings, prideful judgments, and the intricate complexities of social expectation. But through honesty, self-reflection, and the gradual unveiling of true character, their love had blossomed, proving that genuine affection, when allowed to overcome initial biases, could indeed lead to a profound and lasting happiness. The stage was now set for their union, a testament to the transformative power of understanding and the enduring strength of a love born from the ashes of pride and prejudice.
Epilogue. Happily ever after. With the joyous announcements of their engagements, the Bennet household, once a stage for matrimonial anxieties, transformed into a scene of unbridled celebration. The double wedding, a rare and delightful occurrence, brought together the families in a union of happiness and shared hope. Jane Bennet, with her serene beauty and gentle heart, became Mrs. Bingley, settling into the comfortable elegance of Netherfield Park alongside her amiable husband. Their love, born of mutual admiration and unclouded by pride or prejudice, continued to deepen, a testament to the quiet, enduring power of genuine affection. For Elizabeth Bennet, her journey culminated in a union that defied all initial expectations. She became Mrs. Darcy, mistress of the magnificent Pemberley, a role she embraced with grace and intelligence. Her marriage to Mr. Darcy was not merely a culmination of romance, but a profound partnership built on a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and a shared journey of personal growth. Darcy, once burdened by his own pride and reserved nature, found in Elizabeth a lively companion who challenged his intellect and softened his demeanor. He learned from her candor and her ability to see beyond superficial appearances, while she, in turn, came to appreciate his deep integrity, his unwavering loyalty, and the true benevolence that lay beneath his initially forbidding exterior. Their happiness at Pemberley was profound, marked by spirited conversations, shared laughter, and a constant, evolving appreciation for one another. The lives of other key characters also found their conclusions. Mr. and Mrs. Bingley, ever amiable, remained close to the Darcys, their homes echoing with the warmth of their endearing friendship. Georgiana Darcy, once shy and reserved,
blossomed under Elizabeth's kind influence, finding a supportive and affectionate sister-in-law. Even the peculiar Mr. Collins and his pragmatic wife Charlotte continued their lives at Hunsford Parsonage, their peculiar domestic harmony undisturbed by the grander events unfolding around them. Lady Catherine of de Bourgh, though initially outraged by Darcy's marriage to Elizabeth, eventually, if grudgingly, reconciled herself to the union. Her imperious nature softened, perhaps by the sheer force of their happiness. As for Mr. Wickham and Lydia, their volatile union continued, though not without its predictable challenges. Their lives, marked by extravagance and a lack of foresight, often required the quiet, discreet intervention of Darcy, who, for Elizabeth's sake, continued to provide a measure of support. Their story served as a subtle counterpoint to the more profound and enduring happiness found by their elder sisters, a reminder of the consequences of imprudence and a lack of principle. The tale of Pride and Prejudice, therefore, concluded not just with weddings, but with a deeper exploration of human nature, the complexities of society, and the transformative power of understanding. It was a story that celebrated the triumph of genuine affection over superficial judgments, the humbling of pride, and the overcoming of deeply ingrained prejudice. Elizabeth and Darcy, through their arduous journey, had found not just love, but a profound self-knowledge, proving that true happiness lies not in adherence to rigid expectations, but in the courage to see beyond them, to acknowledge one's own flaws, and to embrace the unexpected path to a truly harmonious union. Their lives at Pemberley, filled with intellectual companionship and unwavering devotion, stood as a testament to the enduring power of a love forged in the crucible of misunderstanding and refined by the fire of truth.
And so we close the book on Pride and Prejudice, leaving Elizabeth and Darcy, Jane and Bingley, to their well-deserved happiness at Pemberley and Netherfield. Their story, filled with human complexities and the quiet triumph of understanding, reminds us that true connection often lies beyond first impressions and societal expectations. It has been an honor to share this journey with you here in Eleanor's The Quiet Chapter. I hope you found solace and joy in these narratives. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already and join our quiet community for more timeless stories. Until our next chapter, may your days be filled with peace and the beauty of a good tale. Good night.